Yes. Good morning, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like, first of all, to thank you very, very much to have responded at the right time to our invitation for the member of what we have already called the expanded mechanism on Sudan. I will very shortly present how we suggest, just a suggestion, this meeting should go. We will, the Commission, the UN and the IGAD present its few remarks on what was done since our last meeting on 2nd May. After, we will engage a free debate among the member. Then the floor will be yours at your convenience. Third, I will try to make a summarization, kind of conclusion of we have all expressed, and focus on what we call the heart of the African political process, a proposed process. I will come to that quite in length, and we wish that on that point also we will listen to your suggestion and see what next in a concrete manner. So our meeting will appear a little bit a general debate, but it will have its internal logic to lead to a concrete proposal. I thank you. If you don't have important objection to that, let us win time and to proceed. I thank you. No fighter, the fight stops. Sergio, you have the floor to present from the African Union point of view what we have done since our last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Good morning to everyone. Just to also add to what Prof said, there's translation. So the media will stay for the opening, and then once we go into the plenary discussion, the media will withdraw, and then they will rejoin us for the press briefing. Excellencies, on behalf of Commissioner Bankole, I would mechanism to agree on the way forward. We have also convened a meeting of all humanitarian organizations working in Sudan to discuss how we can cooperate. The Africa CDC also convened a meeting with ministries of health of Sudan and its neighbors to discuss support to the devastated health sector in Sudan. It has also allocated an amount of $3 million to acquire urgent medical supplies and medicines, which it is working to transport to Port Sudan. The AU Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, Madame Bineta Diop, also convened a meeting with Sudanese women to explore ways of supporting them. And there have been, as we all know, alarming reports of sexual assault by the warring parties. The AU, on our part, we have finalized the de-escalation plan, which was adopted by the PSC as the roadmap for the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of Sudan. You are all aware, on the 27th of May 2023, the Peace and Security Council of the AU met at the level of heads of states and government under the chairmanship of His Excellency President Yoweri Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, in his capacity as chair of the PSC for the month of May. So this third meeting of the expanded mechanism is the first engagement we are undertaking following the PSC summit level meeting that took place last Saturday to see the outcome of the meeting and to engage with you more broadly on a way forward. Those of you who I'm sure all of you have seen the communique provides a clear distillation of the AU's policy, which is encapsulated in the roadmap for the resolution of the conflict in Sudan, and it has 6 key elements. The first element is the expanded mechanism to ensure coordination of all efforts of regional and international partners is extremely important. The second one is immediate and permanent inclusive cessation of hostilities. The third area is effective humanitarian response. The fourth area is the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure and full compliance with international humanitarian and human rights law. The fifth point is recognizing the critical role of neighboring states who are impacted by the spillover of the conflict. And finally, is the resumption of an inclusive political transition process that takes into account the contribution of all Sudanese stakeholders towards a democratic civilian government. Excellencies, the AU is also embarking on a shuttle diplomacy of regional capitals to express our concerns at the crisis in Sudan and the potential impact on neighboring states, and indeed the continent as a whole, if the fighting is not arrested immediately and an inclusive political process is restarted. At the last meeting, it was agreed that the AU will consult to put in place a core group that will guide the work of the international community in addressing the crisis in Sudan. We are now ready to convene the core group in the coming week. Excellencies, I think we have all been following the Jeddah process. The Jeddah process has led to the signing of the short-term ceasefire agreement, which was renewed yesterday for another 5 days. But now we need to reflect on how we transform that process for the basis for a broader engagement going further, and an engagement that will be inclusive and that will work towards a comprehensive ceasefire. Excellencies, we need to start planning and preparing for the inclusive negotiations on a political process, which will address both the immediate and long-term challenges in Sudan. While disagreements over the reform of the security sector did provide the immediate trigger for the conflict, Sudan and Sudanese need to address the systemic grievances that date back to decades. Excellencies, the African Union is working to support such an inclusive political process, which will allow for the full representation of the voices of all sectors of Sudanese civil society and political parties. At this point, I would like to hand it back to Professor Lebat, who will then also make some remarks with respect to specific messages from the African Union. Rob.
I thank you. But amendment, I want UN to make its remark and IGAD, and I will come back after the debate on the message that we want to submit to your high attention, and focus on the political solution, how we envisage something in that field. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Professor Labat. Your Excellencies, as the conflict in Sudan enters its second month, this meeting today is very timely, joining all of us together as key actors and partners with common interests and objectives: peace and stability for Sudan and its people. The UN welcomes the heads of state meeting of the Peace and Security Council of the African Union held on 27th of May on the situation in Sudan. The UN fully endorses the summit's demand that the Sudanese warring parties end this conflict without delay and resume a political process that will yield a democratic outcome in line with the democratic aspirations of the Sudanese people. It underscored the overriding importance of a single, inclusive, and consolidated peace process for Sudan, coordinated under the joint auspices of the African Union, IGAD, League of Arab States, and UN, along with like-minded partners. It also noted that a multiplicity and proliferation of mediation initiatives would not serve the interests of the collective will of the Sudanese people. As part of consolidating peace process efforts to that end, the United Nations proposes a panel jointly appointed of 3 or 4 high-level personalities to help lead and coordinate mediation efforts. The trilateral mechanism, AU, IGAD, UN, could work under them and support their efforts. Such a high of the expanded mechanism on Sudan and its core group as an all-inclusive platform of regional, continental, and global actors and institutions to provide broad-based and coordinated engagement within the international community to foster political consensus and common global support for Sudan. We note that the Sudanese warring parties have agreed to a 5-day extension to the May 20th agreement on a short-term ceasefire and humanitarian arrangements signed last month in Jeddah by the representatives of the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces. We urge the warring parties to use these 5 days to reach agreement to implement the ceasefire fully. We take the opportunity to commend the mediation efforts of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United States of America for reaching these agreements, and their continuous monitoring of the violations and their calls upon the warring parties to honor and adhere to their obligations and to refrain from these violations. We know this has not been easy. These important calls were echoed by all of us here to both warring parties. We all want for this war to stop and to end further deterioration of the country and the human suffering. We call upon the warring parties to put the people of Sudan and their access to humanitarian assistance and essential services at the center. We are committed to the delivery of assistance that already had started to reach the people in need. However, without security, access will be limited and humanitarian workers are at risk. As of 29th of May, at least 100 trucks out of 168 trucks of humanitarian supplies were transported to Khartoum, Al Jazeera, Red Sea, Kassala, Gadaref, and Sennar states. This represents 60% of the planned movement of supplies. The supplies included health, nutrition, education, child protection, water sanitation, and hygiene and non-food items. UN humanitarian actors and their partners transported over 2,600 metric tons of supplies that could benefit about 2 million people. Of the items, 1,795 metric tons are for repositioning and distribution, while at least 900 tons of supplies are for immediate distribution. OCHA facilitated principled humanitarian engagement with the SAF, RSF, and the Higher Committee and updated the OCHA focal point in Jeddah. More people can and must be reached throughout all of Sudan, particularly conflict-ridden areas in Khartoum, Darfur, and elsewhere. But the fighting must stop, routes must be secured, and safe passage guaranteed. There will be a need to tackle the permanent cessation of hostilities and support a new political process, a Sudanese-owned one. We believe that a broad-based civilian-led transition meeting the democratic aspirations of the Sudanese people can guarantee a lasting peace in Sudan. We all here share the same interest towards peace and stability in Sudan. Regional and international initiatives emerged, all sharing the same objectives. Hence the importance of this forum here today, the AU-led extended mechanism on Sudan, joining all the multilateral, regional, and international actors, as well as neighboring countries, so we can all have a unified approach and complementarity in resources. We hope we can build together today on these outcomes and use this forum as an opportunity to enhance our collective leverage and unify our efforts in the most effective way to the benefit of Sudan. A secretariat should be formed as soon as possible so that it can coordinate, direct, and support all initiatives supporting a consolidated peace process and political talks. Decisions around a high-level panel should also be taken. Regional organizations and entities should be leveraged to bring to bear the respective strengths, expertise, and leverage in the service of peace. Finally, building on the work we have done in the trilateral mechanism, the United Nations remains committed to working closely with the African Union and IGAD as we pursue a permanent ceasefire, facilitation of humanitarian access, and providing support to the Sudanese actors in preparing the ground for the right moment to return to civilian democratic rule. And we remain committed to engage with all of you to reach this end. We look forward to a fruitful and constructive meeting. And thank you for your attention.
I think UN and its representative, the floor is to IGAD now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Professor Labat. Excellencies, ambassadors, all protocol observed. I will begin by, on behalf of His Excellency, the Executive Secretary of IGAD, re-emphasizing IGAD's ongoing and deep concern regarding the tragic crisis unfolding in the Republic of Sudan. IGAD is steadfastly committed to fostering peace in Sudan and in the broader region. We are by now all too aware of the myriad efforts ongoing to ensure that Sudan is returned to constitutional order. These efforts, led by IGAD member states, the African Union, and the international community at large, address the situation in the Republic of Sudan and bring the warring parties to the negotiating table. And these initiatives are all to be applauded. The signing of the agreement on short-term ceasefire and the humanitarian arrangements in Sudan was a significant step, and we extend our appreciation to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United States of America for facilitating the Jeddah talks. Last Saturday, IGAD actively participated in the Peace and Security Council meeting of the African Union held at the level of heads of state and government on the situation in Sudan, which, among other important decisions, emphasized that no military solution is feasible in this conflict, and only genuine dialogue and reconciliation would be beneficial to Sudan and the entire Horn of Africa region. IGAD's core message to the meeting was on the overriding importance of a single, inclusive, and consolidated peace process for Sudan, coordinated under the joint auspices of the African Union, IGAD, the League of Arab States, and the United Nations, along with like-minded partners. We noted that a multiplicity and proliferation of mediation initiatives would not serve the interests and collective will of the Sudanese people. Separately, there is an IGAD initiative through a 3-member high-level committee led by His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Sudan, comprising of the presidents of the Republic of Kenya and Djibouti, respectively. This initiative has been recognized for its capacity to strengthen coordination and support the 6-point African Union roadmap towards silencing the guns and the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of Sudan. IGAD joins with other partners, such as the UN, in welcoming the 5-day extension to the short-term ceasefire, which was announced earlier this week, and which urges all stakeholders in the Republic of Sudan to expand it to permanent status and further continue pursuing peaceful resolution to this conflict through dialogue. I will end by underlining that peace and security is a public good which we all will benefit from. the stability that we all desire for Sudan must be a product and a reflection of the wishes of the Sudanese people themselves, and be under the leadership of the African Union with strong engagement of IGAD. I will stop at that and look forward to answering any questions that may arise for IGAD in the discussion that ensues. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank IGAD for its statement, and I ask the media, please, to withdraw, because we are going to close session of the extended mechanism. I thank you to do so.